$3 million if you survive my best bully, said the millionaire to the humble young man. Jason Miller felt his heart beating out of rhythm as he looked at the open briefcase full of money. He had never seen so much money together in all his 22 years of life, and now that man in the impeccable suit was offering all of it to him. $3 million if you can stay on the Emperor for 8 seconds, repeated Richard Thompson, the richest rancher in the entire Austin region. But if you fall before that, you leave here without a penny. Jason swallowed dryly. He knew the reputation of the Emperor, the fiercest and most feared bull in all the Texas countryside. No cowboy had managed to tame him in 5 years, but $3 million, it was exactly the amount he needed to save his mother. "Why are you doing this?" asked Jason, trying to understand the motives of that man who barely knew him. Richard closed the briefcase with a sharp snap and walked toward the corral where the Emperor was waiting. The animal was impressive, with over 800 kilograms of pure strength and fury, pointed horns that gleamed under the afternoon sun. "Let's just say I have my reasons," replied Richard, without taking his eyes off the bull. "Do you accept or not?" Jason thought of his mother lying in the hospital bed, connected to machines, waiting for the transplant that would cost exactly $3 million. Mrs. Grace had worked her whole life as a housekeeper to raise her son alone, after her husband abandoned them when Jason was just 5 years old. Now it was his turn to repay all that love and sacrifice. "I accept," said Jason, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. A strange smile crossed Richard's face. It wasn't a smile of satisfaction, but something deeper, almost melancholic. "Are you sure, boy? The Emperor has already sent 17 cowboys to the hospital. This is no joke." "I know what I'm doing," lied Jason, because in truth he had no idea. He had never ridden a bull in his life. He had worked as a bricklayer's helper since he was 15 to support his mother, but he had always dreamed of being a rodeo cowboy. Richard observed the young man for a few seconds, as if analyzing something beyond the apparent determination. There was something familiar about that tanned face, in the way Jason kept his chin up, even in the face of fear. "Very well then, but first I need you to understand one thing. This challenge isn't just about money. It's about honor, courage, and—" Richard hesitated. "About correcting past mistakes." Jason didn't understand what the rancher meant, but nodded. At that moment, all that mattered was getting the money for his mother's surgery. The doctor had been clear. Without the liver transplant in at most 2 weeks, Mrs. Grace wouldn't make it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. "When will the challenge be?" asked Jason, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Tomorrow at sunset. That gives you time to prepare or back out," replied Richard, storing the briefcase in his imported car. "Sleep well, boy. Tomorrow we'll find out what you're really made of." As Richard's car drove away down the dirt road, Jason remained in front of the corral watching the Emperor. The bull stared back at him, as if he knew exactly what was coming. There was something almost human in that gaze, an intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. Jason returned to his small house on the outskirts of the ranch, where he had lived alone since his mother was hospitalized 3 months ago. The house was simple, with 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that only fit an old sofa and a tube television that no longer worked properly. He sat on the bed and picked up his phone to call the hospital. "Good evening, I'm calling from the ICU, answered a nurse. "It's Jason Miller, son of Grace Miller, from bed 12. How is she?" "Mr. Jason, she's stable, but—" The nurse hesitated. "The doctor needs to speak with you tomorrow morning. It's important." Jason's heart sank. He knew urgent news was never good news. "Is she getting worse?" "It's better to speak with the doctor in person, son. But come early, okay?" Jason hung up and stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to sleep. His mind kept creating scenarios about what the doctor might want to say. Was time running out faster than he had imagined? The next morning, he woke before sunrise and took the first bus to the city. Memorial Hospital was a 40-minute ride, enough time for his anxiety to grow even more. Dr. Robert Wilson was a 60-year-old man with graying hair and a kind gaze. He had followed Mrs. Grace Miller's case from the beginning and had developed a special fondness for the family. "Jason, have a seat," said the doctor, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. "I have news about your mother." "She got worse, didn't she?" Jason asked, bracing himself for the worst. "Actually, we have an opportunity. A compatible donor appeared in New York City. But the surgery needs to be done within the next 3 days. We can't wait any longer." Jason felt a mix of relief and despair. 3 days. That was even less time than he had imagined. "Doctor, I'll get the money." "Today? Can you prepare everything?" Dr. Wilson looked at him with surprise. "Jason, it's $3 million. How do you plan to get that amount in 1 day?" "I have a job to do. A unique opportunity." The doctor didn't seem convinced, but he knew that young man's determination. "All right, I'll prepare everything for the surgery, but I need a definite answer by tomorrow morning. After that, the window of opportunity will close." Jason nodded and went to visit his mother in the ICU. Mrs. Grace Miller was sleeping, but even unconscious, her face held the serene expression that had always characterized her. She was a beautiful woman at 58, with completely white hair that she always said was the result of raising a son alone. "Mom, I'll get the money," whispered Jason, holding her cold hand. "Everything will be all right. You'll see." On the way back to the ranch, Jason stopped at St. Patrick's Church, where he had been an altar boy in his childhood. Father Thomas, a 70-year-old man who had known the family for decades, was arranging the altar flowers. "Jason, my son, how is your mother?" "A donor appeared, Father." "But I need $3 million by tomorrow." Father Thomas stopped what he was doing and approached the young man. $3 million? Jason, that's a fortune. Don't do anything foolish out of desperation." "It's not foolish, Father. It's an opportunity to save my mother." The priest had known Jason since he was little and knew that when the boy decided something, he rarely changed his mind. He was as stubborn as his mother, but had a good heart. "Promise me one thing, my son. Whatever this job is, remember that your mother wouldn't want you to get hurt to save her. She would rather pass in peace knowing you're well." Jason hugged the priest and headed to the ranch. It was 3 in the afternoon and the challenge would be at sunset. He had little time to prepare, but he didn't even know how to prepare for riding a bull. He decided to look for George Baker, a 65-year-old former rodeo cowboy who lived near the ranch and was known for his stories about the golden days of rodeo in the region. "Boy, have you lost your mind?" was George's first reaction when Jason told him about the challenge. "Emperor is no joke. I've seen plenty of good folks get badly hurt with tame bulls. That one is pure meanness. Mr. George, I need your help. At least tell me how I should position myself, how to hold on." The old cowboy sighed and shook his head. "Jason, wasn't your father a cowboy?" "My father abandoned us when I was a child. I never saw him again." George fell silent for a few seconds, as if processing some information. "What was his name?" "Michael Miller. Why?" "Nothing. Just curiosity," lied George. But Jason noticed something strange in the old man's reaction. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to teach you, because your life may depend on it." For the next 2 hours, George taught Jason the basics of bull riding: how to position his legs, where to hold on, how to maintain balance. It wasn't much time to learn an art that took years to master, but it was all they had. "The most important thing," said George, "is not to fight against the bull. You have to move with it, understand its rhythm. And remember, 8 seconds can feel like an eternity when you're on top of an animal like that." At 5:30 in the afternoon, Jason arrived at Richard Thompson's ranch. The place was imposing, with a main house that looked more like a mansion and modern corrals that stretched for acres. Richard was waiting for him by the Emperor's pen, now accompanied by 3 men Jason didn't know. "I thought you weren't going to show up," said Richard, but there was something different in his expression, a tension that hadn't been there the day before. "Man of my word," replied Jason, "and our deal still stands." Richard showed him the open briefcase. The money was still there, more tempting than ever. $3 million if you last 8 seconds, but first, I need to tell you some things you should know." Jason waited, but Richard seemed to be struggling with his words. "Your father, Michael Miller, do you know where he is?" The question took Jason by surprise. I don't even know if he's alive. Why are you asking that? Because... Richard took a deep breath. Because he worked for me 20 years ago. He was the best cowboy I ever saw, and because he's my half-brother. The world seemed to spin around Jason. Richard kept talking, but the words came as a distant echo. Our father had 2 sons, me with his first wife, rich and respectable, Michael with a ranch maid who was sent away when they found out about the affair. Michael grew up knowing the truth, but was never officially recognized. Jason tried to process the information. Richard was his uncle. That explained a lot, but created even more questions. He was working here when he met your mother, Richard continued. Mrs. Grace was a teacher at the local school and fell madly in love with him. Michael was rebellious, constantly fought with me because I had inherited everything while he had nothing. And why did he leave? Richard looked away. Because I made him go. I told him that if he didn't disappear from here, I would tell Grace about his past, about the fights, about the jail time. Jail time. Michael had been arrested for a bar fight when he was young. Nothing serious, but your mother didn't know. I used that against him. Jason felt anger growing in his chest. You destroyed my family, why? Out of jealousy? Out of pride? Out of fear? For being just 25 and not knowing how to handle the situation, Richard admitted. I've spent the last 20 years regretting it. At that moment, everything made sense to Jason. The challenge wasn't about money. It was about redemption. Richard was offering a chance to correct the mistakes of the past. And what does this have to do with me riding the Emperor? Michael was the only cowboy who could ride him. The Emperor was young at the time, but already known to be impossible to tame. Your father rode him dozens of times. It was as if they understood each other. Jason looked at the bull and for the first time noticed something different. The animal wasn't looking at him with aggression, but with an almost respectful curiosity. Are you telling me you believe I can ride him because I'm my father's son? I'm saying that perhaps the ability is hereditary, and I'm offering you a chance to get the money to save your mother and at the same time honor your father's memory. Jason was silent for a few minutes. His whole life he had wondered what it would be like if he had known his father. Now he discovered that the man he hated for abandoning them had actually been thrown out by his own brother. Where is he now? Asked Jason. I don't know. I've tried to look for him many times over the years, but he disappeared completely. Maybe he doesn't even know you exist. He knows, said a voice behind them. Everyone turned and saw George Baker approaching, holding an old hat in his hands. Mr. George, what are you doing here? Asked Jason. I came to see my grandson ride the bull that his grandfather tamed for years. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason looked from George to Richard, trying to process this new revelation. You're my grandfather? I'm George Miller, Michael's father. I changed to Baker when I came to live here after he married your mother. I didn't want to cause problems for you. Jason felt his legs weaken. In one afternoon he had discovered he had a millionaire uncle and a grandfather who had lived just a few miles away for 20 years. Why did you never say anything? Because your father made me promise I would never tell. He wanted to protect you and your mother from our family history. But when I heard about the challenge this morning, I couldn't stand by. Richard intervened. How did you hear about the challenge? In a small town, everything spreads fast. And besides, George smiled, I've worked here on the ranch for 15 years. I'm responsible for taking care of the bulls. Another surprise. Jason was starting to feel like his whole life had been a lie. So you two planned this? No, said Richard and George at the same time. I didn't even know George worked here under another last name, explained Richard. And he didn't know I had discovered who you were when I saw you working on the construction of the new wing of the ranch last month. Jason remembered. He had worked as a mason's helper, building a new barn on Richard's property. That's when the two of them met, although at the time, he didn't know who the owner was. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. So this was all a coincidence? Asked Jason. I don't believe in coincidences, said George. I believe the time has come to set things right. Your father was always a good man, Jason. He was just lost in life, trying to find his place in the world. And you're sure he doesn't know about me? George hesitated before answering. He knows, son. He always has. He's been following your life from afar for years. What do you mean? Who do you think paid the hospital bills in the first few months when your mother was admitted? Who deposited those $300 into her account every month for the last 5 years? Jason had always wondered about those mysterious deposits. Mrs. Grace said it was help from the church, but he was suspicious. My father is paying my mother's bills, and he's studied every movement of your lives. He knows you're a hard-working, honest young man who never caused any trouble. He's proud of you. Then why has he never shown up? Because he's afraid he's not worthy of you, and because your mother got married again 10 years ago. Jason remembered Charles, the kind man who had come into Mrs. Grace's life when he was 16. Charles was a widower, worked as an accountant, and treated both Jason and his mother well. They never officially married, but lived together for 8 years until Charles passed away from a heart attack. Does he know about Charles? He does, and he was happy she found someone good. Your father has matured a lot over the years, Jason. He understood that sometimes loving someone means letting them move forward. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and red. It was almost time for the challenge. I need to decide whether I'm going through with this, said Jason. The decision is yours, replied Richard. But I want you to know that regardless of the outcome, I will help with the hospital bills. I won't let my sister-in-law, he hesitated. I won't let my nephew's mother leave due to lack of funds. Jason looked at him surprised. Are you serious? Completely. I should have done this years ago. I should have taken responsibility for you all from the beginning. Then why do you still want me to ride the bull? Richard looked at Emperor, who remained quiet in the corral, as if waiting for something. Because some mistakes can only be corrected with courage, because you need to prove to yourself that you are capable, and because, he smiled genuinely for the first time, because I'm curious to see if your father's legend is true. George approached his grandson. Jason, when your father rode Emperor, it wasn't just about strength or technique. It was about connection. Your father understood animals in a special way. You work in construction, but you've always shown the same sensitivity with animals. It was true. Jason had always had a way with animals. As a child, he could approach aggressive dogs that no one else could touch. Wild cats would eat from his hand. There was something natural in him that attracted animals. What happens if I manage to ride for 8 seconds but don't accept the money? Why wouldn't you accept it? Asked Richard. Because now I know you're going to help my mother anyway, and because $3 million seems like too much for 8 seconds of work. Richard and George exchanged glances. What if we used the money to open a bull riding training center here at the ranch? Suggested Richard. With you as head instructor and George as consultant, it could be a tribute to your father. The idea took Jason by surprise, but it made sense. He had always dreamed of working with rodeo, and this would be a unique opportunity to honor his father's memory and create something positive. And if I don't make the 8 seconds? Then you learn that some things in life are harder than we imagine, but that trying is already a victory, replied George. Jason looked at the sun setting on the horizon and made his decision. I'll try. Preparations began immediately. Richard had hired a medical team to be on standby and installed safety equipment around the corral. It wouldn't be an official rodeo, but all precautions were being taken. Jason put on the protective vest and gear that George had brought. His hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline. Remember everything I taught you today? Asked George. I remember. And remember the most important thing? Don't fight the bull. Move with him. Exactly. Now go out there and show everyone which family you come from. Jason approached the corral where Emperor was waiting. The bull was even more impressive up close. Defined muscles under dark fur, intelligent eyes that seemed to be calculating something. Well, Emperor, whispered Jason, let's see if you remember my father. The bull tilted its head slightly, as if listening. For a moment, Jason had the strange feeling that the animal knew exactly who he was. He climbed onto the corral fence and positioned himself over the bull. Emperor remained quiet, allowing Jason to settle and adjust his grip on the rope. Ready? shouted Richard from outside the corral. Jason took a deep breath and nodded. Let him go. The gate opened, and Emperor exploded into motion. It wasn't just brute force, it was a violent and precise dance. The bull leaped, spun, tried to throw off the weight on its back, with a technique refined through years of experience. Jason remembered his grandfather's words and tried not to fight the movements. Instead, he sought to find the rhythm, the logic behind the apparent madness. 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Emperor changed strategy, beginning to spin rapidly to the left. Jason felt his body pulled by the centrifugal force, but managed to hold on. 5 seconds, 6 seconds. The bull stopped abruptly and leaped high, arching its back. Jason nearly lost his balance, but a force he didn't know where it came from helped him straighten up. 7 seconds. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Emperor reduced the intensity of his movements, as if testing Jason rather than trying to throw him off. The bull made a few smaller jumps, almost ceremonial. 8 seconds. The bell rang, and Jason jumped off the bull, rolling on the ground and getting up immediately. Emperor stopped completely and turned to face him. For a few seconds, man and animal looked each other in the eye. Then the impossible happened. Emperor lowered his head slightly, in a gesture anyone knowledgeable about animals would recognize as a sign of respect. Jason slowly approached and extended his hand. Emperor sniffed his fingers and allowed him to touch his head. "Unbelievable," murmured Richard. "I've never seen anything like it." George had tears in his eyes. Just like his father, exactly like his father. Jason left the corral and was greeted with hugs from Richard and George. The medical team approached to examine him, but he didn't have a scratch. "Well, a deal is a deal," said Richard, showing the briefcase. $3 million are yours." Jason looked at the money, then at Richard and George. "I want to propose something different." The two waited. "I'll take $1 million to pay for my mother's surgery, with a margin for extra costs. The other $2 million go to the training center you mentioned, but with one condition." "What?" "I want you to help me find my father. It's time for our family to truly reunite." Richard smiled and extended his hand. "I accept, and I think I know where to start looking." 3 days later, Mrs. Grace was recovering well from the surgery. The doctors were optimistic about her recovery, and she was already conscious and talking. Jason was by her bedside when Richard arrived with news. "We found your father." Jason stood up immediately. "Where is he?" "Montana. He works on a cattle ranch and has a family." Jason felt his heart tighten. "Did he remarry?" "Not exactly. He's been living with a woman for 10 years, and they have an 8-year-old daughter. But they never officially married because he could never forget your mother." Mrs. Grace, who was listening to the conversation, held her son's hand. "Jason, if your father is well and has a family, perhaps it's best to leave things as they are. Mom, you told me he never stopped loving you. And he has a daughter. That means I have a sister." Richard approached the bed. "Grace, I know I have no right to ask for anything after all I've done, but Michael deserves to know you're well, and he deserves to know the man your son has become." Mrs. Grace was silent for a few minutes. "How is he? Physically, I mean." "Well. More mature, obviously, but well. The woman he lives with is named Susan and is a teacher, just like you. Their daughter, Emily, practices horseback riding." A sad smile crossed Mrs. Grace's face. "I always knew he'd find another teacher. That was the type of woman who attracted him." "Mom, can I go meet my sister?" asked Jason. "You may, son. But remember that they also have a family to protect. Don't force anything. Let it happen naturally." A week later, Jason was driving down the dirt road that led to the ranch where Michael worked. Richard had offered to come along, but Jason preferred to have that meeting alone. The ranch was much smaller than Richard's, simpler but well kept. Jason stopped the car in front of the main house and took a deep breath before getting out. An 8-year-old girl was playing in the yard with a dog. When she saw Jason, she stopped and stared at him curiously. "Hi," she said. "Are you lost?" "Hi, I'm looking for Michael Miller. Do you know where I can find him?" "That's my dad." "Dad," she shouted toward the house. "There's a man here looking for you." The door opened, and Jason saw his father for the first time in 17 years. Michael had changed, obviously, but he was unmistakably the same person from the few childhood photos Jason had. The two men stared at each other for a few seconds. Michael slowly came down the porch steps as if he were seeing a ghost. "Jason?" he asked, his voice choked. "Hi, Dad." Michael began to cry, not caring about his daughter who was watching everything with curiosity. He hugged Jason tightly, as if trying to make up for 20 years of absence in a single gesture. "How did you find me? How's your mother?" "It's a long story. Mum is fine, recovering from surgery, and I met Uncle Richard." Michael pulled back slightly, his expression changing. "Richard? He told you? He told me everything, about you being brothers, about why you left, about what happened." "Emily, go call your mother," Michael said to his daughter. Why, who is this man?" Michael looked at Jason, asking for permission with his eyes. "You can tell her," said Jason. "Emily, this is your older brother, Jason." The girl's eyes widened. "Brother? I have a brother?" At that moment, a woman came out of the house. She was pretty, about 40 years old, and looked at the scene trying to understand what was happening. "Susan, this is Jason, my son," said Michael. Susan approached and greeted Jason politely, but it was obvious she was surprised and a little uncomfortable with the situation. "Nice to meet you, Jason. Michael talked about you a lot." "The pleasure is mine, and sorry for showing up so suddenly. I know it must be strange." "A little," admitted Susan, "but it's also good. Michael always blamed himself for leaving you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The four of them sat on the porch and Jason told everything that had happened in the last few weeks. Michael listened quietly, sometimes interrupting to ask questions about Grace. "Did she really recover well from the surgery?" "Yes. The doctors said the recovery is going better than expected." "And Richard has really changed that much?" "I think guilt consumed him all these years. He's trying to fix the mistakes of the past." Michael was silent for a few minutes. "Jason, I need you to understand something. When I left, I thought I was doing what was best for you. I was young, angry. I had nothing to offer. I thought you'd be better off without me. And now, do you still think that?" "Now, I know it was the biggest mistake of my life. I missed 20 years of your life. I didn't see you grow up. I didn't get to know Charles. I wasn't there when your mother needed me." Susan held her husband's hand. "Michael, you can't keep blaming yourself forever. What matters is what we do from now on." Emily, who had been quiet during the whole conversation, finally spoke. "Jason, do you know how to ride a horse?" "No, but I just learned how to ride a bull." "What do you mean?" Jason told the story of the challenge with Emperor, and Emily's eyes sparkled with emotion. "Wow, can I meet the bull?" "Of course. Actually, we're setting up a training center at Uncle Richard's ranch. You could train there." "Really? Dad, can I?" Michael looked at Susan, who nodded positively. "We can talk about it," he said. Jason stayed at the ranch for 3 days, getting to know his father's family better and telling stories about his life and his mother. He discovered that Emily was a smart and brave girl, passionate about animals just like him. Susan proved to be a genuinely good person who had helped Michael become a better version of himself. On the last day, Michael gathered the courage to ask the question that had been stuck in his throat for years. "Jason, do you forgive me?" Jason thought about the question. For years he had dreamed of this moment, imagining what he would say to his father if he ever met him again. He had gone through anger, resentment, curiosity, and finally acceptance. "Dad, I have nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right at the time, and look how things turned out. You have a beautiful family, I became a man you can be proud of, and now we all have the chance to be a real family. And your mother, would she forgive me?" "Why don't you ask her in person?" Michael turned pale. "Do you think she would see me?" "I think she deserves the chance to decide that." 2 weeks later, The whole family was gathered at the hospital where Mrs. Grace was finishing her recovery. She had been medically discharged the day before, but wanted to stay one more day to emotionally prepare for the meeting. When Michael entered the room, accompanied by Susan and Emily, Grace was sitting in the armchair by the window, wearing a light blue robe that Jason had brought from home. The two looked at each other for long seconds before any words were spoken. 20 years had passed. Both had changed, aged, lived other stories, but there was something familiar and comforting in that look. "Hi, Grace," said Michael, his voice almost inaudible. "Hi, Michael. How are you?" "Good. Better now that I know you're well too." Susan stepped forward and introduced herself politely. Grace received her kindly, without any hostility. Emily was shy at first, but was soon charmed by that sweet, smiling lady her father had loved so much. "So you're my other grandmother?" asked Emily. "If you want me to be," replied Grace, opening her arms. The girl approached and allowed Grace to hug her. It was a touching moment that left everyone emotional. "Grace," said Michael, "I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I built a new life, a part of me always stayed here." "I know, Michael, and I understand. I never completely forgot you either." "Can you forgive me?" "I forgave you years ago. Life is too short to hold grudges. And look," she pointed to Jason and Emily, "what we created. Even apart, we raised wonderful children." Susan, who might have felt uncomfortable with that conversation, surprised everyone. "Grace, thank you for raising such a good man as Jason, and thank you for loving Michael in a way that made him a better father to Emily. And thank you for taking care of him all these years and for giving me such a special granddaughter," replied Grace. Jason watched everything with admiration. They were 3 mature women, each having lived their pains and joys, finding a civilized and loving way to share space in their lives. "And now," asked Richard, who had arrived a few minutes earlier, "how do we organize this crazy family?" Everyone laughed, and the tension in the air completely dissipated. "Simple," said George, who was also present. "We do what families do. We get together on Sundays for lunch, we celebrate birthdays together, we argue every now and then, and we always love each other." "And where would this Sunday lunch be?" asked Susan. "At the ranch," replied Richard. "We have space for everyone, and the training center will need a family to run properly." "Training center?" asked Michael. Jason explained the project they were developing, a place where young people from the region could learn to ride bulls and horses, focusing not only on technique, but also on the values of respect for animals and rural tradition. "We want you to be the head instructor," said Jason to his father. "After all, you're the legend who could ride the emperor." "Was. Nowadays I can barely ride a gentle horse," laughed Michael. "The skills come back," assured George. "And you have a lot of knowledge to pass on." "What about me?" asked Emily. "Can I help too?" "Of course," said Jason. "You can be our first official student." In the following months, the family gradually and naturally reorganized. Michael, Susan, and Emily moved to a new house built on Richard's property, near the house where Jason came to live with Mrs. Grace after her discharge from the hospital. The training center became a reality and soon attracted young people from all over the region. Jason discovered he had a knack for teaching, combining the patience he learned from his mother with the intuition for handling animals he inherited from his father. Emperor became a sort of mascot for the center. Although retired from competitions, he still allowed Jason to ride him from time to time for educational demonstrations. It was as if the bull understood his role as the master of masters. A year later, during the first official rodeo organized by the center, the whole family was gathered on the makeshift bleachers. Grace and Susan had become true friends, discovering they had more in common than they imagined. Both were retired teachers and shared a love for reading and caring for the people around them. Emily had become an excellent rider and was eager to start bull training when she turned 10. George, at 70 years old, had found new energy in teaching the young people of the region. Michael and Richard had finally settled their past differences and worked together in managing the center. It was beautiful to see the two brothers, who had spent decades separated by pride and resentment, now planning the future side by side. Jason was preparing for a special demonstration when he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his father. Nervous? Asked Michael. A little. It's the first time I'm riding Emperor with an audience. Remember the first time you rode him? How could I forget? It changed my whole life. No, son, you changed your own life. The bull was just the instrument. The courage came from within you. Jason hugged his father and climbed onto the corral fence. Emperor waited patiently, as he always did. The bull had aged in the past year, but still maintained the dignity and strength that made him a legend. Well, old friend, whispered Jason as he positioned himself. One more time? Emperor snorted softly, as if agreeing. The bell rang and the two moved in perfect harmony. It was no longer the violent dance of a year ago, but something closer to an artistic performance. Jason had learned to read every movement of the bull, and Emperor seemed to enjoy having a partner who understood him. When the 8 seconds were completed, Jason didn't jump off immediately. He remained on the animal's back for a few more seconds, looking at the bleachers where his family was applauding him. Mrs. Grace was standing, clapping and smiling proudly. Susan held Emily in her lap so the girl could see better. Michael and Richard were side by side, both with tears in their eyes. George tipped his old hat. Finally, Jason jumped off and approached Emperor. The bull lowered his head to receive the affection that always came after his performances. "Thank you, friend," said Jason, "for everything." That night, during the barbecue that followed the rodeo, Jason stepped away from the party for a moment to gaze at the starry sky. The property was lit up by colorful lights strung between the trees, and the sound of conversations and laughter created a contagiously happy atmosphere. Grace approached and stood beside her son. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is, Mom. A year ago I was desperate, not knowing how to get the money for your surgery. Today I have a large family, a job I love, and you are completely healed. Life has those kinds of surprises. Sometimes what seems like our end is actually a new beginning. Are you happy?" Grace looked toward the party, where Michael was chatting animatedly with some young men from the training center, while Susan and Emily helped George serve the barbecue. "Very happy, son. Not in the way I imagined it would be, but maybe it's even better this way. I've learned that happiness doesn't have to follow the patterns we imagine when we're young. And you don't mind sharing Dad with Susan?" Grace smiled. "Jason, true love doesn't shrink when it's shared, it multiplies. Your father has enough love for 2 families, and Susan is a wonderful person who has made him a better man. How could I possibly mind that?" "You're amazing, Mom." "No, son, I've just learned with age that holding a grudge is a waste of time and energy. I'd rather use that energy to create beautiful memories with the people I love." Richard approached the two of them, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Grace, Jason, come make a toast with us." They returned to the group where Michael was organizing a toast. "I want to thank all of you," he said, his voice emotional. "A year ago, I was a divided man, carrying guilt from the past and fear of the future. Today, I am part of a family I never imagined I could have." "I also have something to say," interrupted Richard. "For years, I lived with the weight of having separated a family out of pride and immaturity. Today, I see that perhaps things happen the way they're meant to. If it had been different, we wouldn't have Susan and Emily here with us. We wouldn't have the training center. We wouldn't have learned all we've learned about forgiveness and new beginnings." "And I," said George, "want to say that at 70 years old I discovered it's never too late to be a real grandfather. Jason, Emily, you gave me a new reason to wake up every day." Susan raised her glass. "To families that come together in unexpected ways and to second chances," Grace added, "and to brave bulls that teach us about courage and love." Everyone toasted under the starry sky of Austin, while Emperor watched from his pen, as if he knew he had been responsible for bringing that unlikely family together. 2 years had passed, and Jason's training center had become a national reference. Young people from all over Brazil came to learn about riding and rural values. The project had grown so much that it now also included a social program for low-income boys from the region. Jason had married Claire, a veterinarian he had met during one of the center's rodeos. Claire fit perfectly into the family, bringing even more joy and knowledge about animal care. Emily, now 10 years old, had become a little celebrity in children's riding, winning several regional competitions. Mrs. Grace loved traveling with her granddaughter to the competitions, creating memories she had never imagined having. Michael and Susan had made their union official at the courthouse, in a simple yet moving ceremony with the whole family present. Richard served as the best man, symbolizing the definitive reconciliation between the brothers. During the ceremony, Jason gave a speech that was forever etched in everyone's memory. 3 years ago, I was just a desperate young man, trying to save his mother. Today, I'm a son, a brother, a nephew, a grandson, a husband, and an instructor. I learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about choices. It's about deciding to love, to forgive, and to grow together. It's about turning pain into strength and mistakes into lessons. My father taught me that sometimes we need to step away to learn how to come back the right way. My mother taught me that true love is patient and always forgives. My Uncle Richard showed me that it's never too late to correct our mistakes. My grandfather George taught me that wisdom is to be shared, not kept. Susan gave me a wonderful sister, and Claire gave me the chance to build an even better future. And the Emperor, Jason smiled, taught me that sometimes we need to ride the wildest bull to discover who we really are. That night, after all the guests had left, Jason returned to Emperor's pen one last time. The bull had been calmer in recent months, already showing signs of old age. "How are you, old friend?" said Jason, offering an apple. Emperor accepted the treat and allowed Jason to stroke his head. "I wanted to thank you for everything. I know you could have hurt me that first day, but you chose to give me a chance. Why?" The bull looked at him with those intelligent eyes that always seemed to hold secrets. "Maybe you knew I needed a lesson in courage more than an injury. Maybe you knew our family needed to heal. Or maybe you just wanted to honor the memory of the old days with my father." Jason remained there for a few more minutes, in silence, just enjoying the company of the animal that had changed his life. "Rest well, Emperor. You deserve it." The next morning, George found the bull lying peacefully in the pen. Emperor had passed during the night, without pain, without a struggle, just closing his eyes for an eternal sleep. The family gathered to say goodbye to the old companion. They decided to bury him in a special place on the property, under a 100-year-old tree that provided shade for other animals. "I think he knew his mission was complete," said Michael, putting his hand on his son's shoulder. "What was his mission?" asked Emily. "To teach us about family," replied Grace. "And he did it just right." Jason placed a simple plaque on the grave. "Emperor 1995-2027, the bull that brought a family together." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story about family, courage, and second chances. Do you think Jason made the right decision by accepting the challenge? And what did you think about the way everyone managed to forgive and rebuild family bonds? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.